Dan Henderson's going to be taking on Anderson Silva. Great fight, obviously a former training partner of yours. Who's going to take that fight and why?
Well, you know, that's a tough fight to call. You know, obviously Dan Henderson's a very, very good friend of mine. I've been very, very impressed with Anderson Silva and the skills that he's shown. If Dan Henderson can go out and stick to the game plan and use the wrestling skills that he possesses, he could make it a very tough night for Anderson. That's the style and skill set that Anderson has trouble with. The problem is that Dan has a tendency to go out and want to sling leather, and that's just not a good idea with Anderson. So it's anybody's match, really. Who imposes their will is going to tell the tale.
Dan Henderson versus Anderson Silva, a couple of potential opponents down the road. Who's going to win that fight and why?
I think Dan Henderson. I think he's got the right mindset and the right tools to give Anderson a really hard fight. You know, he's gritty, he's rough and tough in the clinch. He can handle himself to get out of that tight clinch just because of his Greco background. And he's the guy who can take him down and control him. We all know that Anderson Silva can be taken down. We saw that with Travis Lutter, with Nate Marquardt. But what's hard to do is to control him on the ground because he's so wiry and long. You know, those guys are awkward to roll with on the ground. Dan, because of his wrestling and now his strong jiu-jitsu grappling background, he can be the guy to do that, in my opinion. Have the strength and physicality to muscle him around on the ground and, if anything, earn out a decision, you know, at the least.
Second question, we got Anderson Silva, and he's going to be taking on Dan Henderson. That's a crazy fight, too. Who's going to win that and why?
I think Anderson Silva's going to win it. If Dan Henderson takes him down, I don't see him causing enough damage to finish Silva. And Silva could submit him on the ground, could finish him standing up, so I think Silva has the edge.
Dan Henderson will fight Anderson Silva. Who do you think will win this fight?
I think Anderson Silva gonna beat him because Anderson Silva, I think, is the best fighter of the world. It's very technical. I never see before.
And Dan Henderson's going to be taking on Silva, Anderson Silva. It's a great fight. Who's going to take it and why?
Dan Henderson's been one of my heroes since I was a little kid, watching him wrestle in the Olympics, and I want it to be him, but we'll see what happens.
Enticing matchups coming up in the UFC. I want to ask you about Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson. I'm going to ask you, who's going to take it and why?
Wow, that one is a fight that I'm definitely looking forward to because obviously Anderson Silva's run roughshod throughout his career so far in the UFC, destroying all of his competition. Dan Henderson, though, that's a guy who's almost impossible to beat. He lost via submission to Antonio Rogerio Nogueira's on the card tonight, but Dan Henderson is a guy that you almost have to kill to beat, and I think really stylistically he's going to present a very tough fight for Anderson Silva because of his wrestling pedigree and his natural strength. I know Anderson Silva is a devastating striker, loves to work in the clinch, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can impose his will on Dan Henderson. I don't know if Henderson can beat Anderson Silva outright, but I wouldn't be surprised if Henderson doesn't win, maybe by a gritty, unanimous decision.
First fight.